Every generation seems to have its own vision of the good life. For some, it's climbing the corporate ladder until your name appears on the corner office. Others dream of making enough money to leave work behind altogether. Scroll through social media for a few minutes and you'll find countless promises of passive income, financial freedom, early retirement, and lifestyles that appear untouched by ordinary responsibility. Against all of that, the Apostle Paul writes something remarkably ordinary. Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. It's almost disappointing at first glance. Surely ambition should aim at something larger than quietness. Yet, Paul goes on to describe exactly what he means. Attend to your own affairs, work with your hands, live in such a way that you're respected by outsiders and are not unnecessarily dependent on others. A few months later, Paul writes to the same church again. Apparently, some believers had stopped working altogether. Perhaps they expected Christ's return at any moment. Perhaps they simply became idle. Whatever the reason, Paul doesn't soften his language. If anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat. Those words sound almost jarring to our modern ears. Today we're looking at what these two passages teach us about work, provision, responsibility, and why ordinary faithfulness may be one of the most overlooked virtues in the Christian life. Welcome to Plan to Prosper, where we exist to honor God by helping faithful servants steward their finances wisely and build wealth that endures for generations. Welcome to another episode of Plan to Prosper. We are here today. I said we, but I actually just mean me. Logan is typically with me, but he is sick. So I found out about an hour ago that I'm going to be running this one solo. So we're all in for a treat because of that. But today we're going to be looking at a little bit of a biblical theology of work. Probably not a super deep dive into this because there's probably a lot that we could say about it. But there were two passages that stuck out to me recently in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians that led me to put together this outline and give us sort of a broad overview of what should we be thinking about when it comes to our daily vocations? When you go to work every day, what are the things that should be driving and motivating you to do what you do? Are you just showing up to get a paycheck, or are you actually trying to fulfill some deeper calling in your life? And I think the Apostle Paul has some wise words for us to consider and to live by. But before we get to Paul, I think we should start way at the beginning and look at Genesis 2:15, which says, "Then the Lord God took the man, that is Adam, and put him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and to keep it." So before we can understand what Paul's telling the Thessalonians here, we need to just look at the very beginning and what is God's purpose and meaning and design for work. I think we subconsciously view work as a result of the fall. We know that part of the curse is that thorns are going to grow out of the ground and work is going to become more difficult. But as we see in Genesis 2:15, if you're familiar with the Bible, that's before the fall. And God puts Adam in the garden to cultivate and to keep it. Cultivate and keep. Those are active words. Those are actions that Adam was expected to do work before the fall. The fall made work more difficult, but work existed before sin entered the world. His labor wasn't the punishment. It was part of his purpose as a man. And so work is woven into our original design as human beings. It's woven into the fabric of creation itself. The fall didn't create work. It simply made it more difficult. So Genesis 3 comes along, introduces thorns, sweat, frustration, and toil. And so the curse affects how we work, not whether we'll work. I think it's important to just not make sure to make sure we're not confusing those two things. That when you go to work in the morning, that this is not, oh, thanks, Adam, for ruining this and making me have to commute 30 minutes to my job. That's actually not true. The frustration of traffic, yeah, that's probably part of it. The frustration of coworkers that get on your nerves, or clients that don't always behave the way that maybe you want them to, that's all part of the fall. But the work itself is not. That was your calling from the get-go. So it's important to not confuse those things. And I think we can just look at God himself. He is a worker. He created the world. And I think just the nature of him resting on the seventh day, not because he needed to, but to set an example for us, kind of proves the point that he puts the work in. He worked 6 days to create the earth, and on the seventh day, he takes a rest, and that's kind of the pattern that he wants and expects from us. In our modern world, we typically do like 5 days, and we get 2 days off, but I think we could add a little extra work on Saturdays. And a lot of us probably do stuff around the house, or we use that time to maybe not work on our vocation, although a lot of people probably do as well, but to work on other things that are important as well. I think work is one of the primary ways that we exercise the dominion that God calls us to in Genesis 2:15. So build a business, grow your food. Raising children is a part of this. Creating products, solving problems, caring for God's creation. These are all ways to exercise dominion and to really fulfill the cultural mandate that God calls us to in Genesis 2:15. And when we do this, it elevates every single legitimate vocation. So there's no sacred secular divide. You're not a better Christian because you're a pastor. You're not a better Christian because you're in a nonprofit ministry. You can fulfill your calling as a Christian in the secular world by being a good worker. And obviously there's more opportunities perhaps for explicit gospel conversations when you're a pastor rather than working in the corporate world, of course. But you can absolutely fulfill your Christian duty as a worker in a secular company. 100%. You're not called to just work for Christian companies or to just be a pastor or anything like that, or to be a missionary or to go out and that's just not what everybody's going to be called to. Everybody has different callings. So you can fulfill your duty no matter how menial your job might seem. It doesn't actually matter what your job is as long as it's honest and legitimate and you're not making money in any sort of unethical ways. As long as it's an honest job and legitimate and you're providing real value to the people that are buying your product or the people that you're serving, you can absolutely honor and glorify the Lord in this. Whether you're a plumber, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an electrician or you work at McDonald's, you can fulfill your calling to show up, provide value, and to do the things that God is calling you to do to glorify Him through your work. So with that foundation in place, let's go ahead and look at 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, a couple of passages, and realize that Paul's not introducing a new work ethic here. He is really just continuing to add on to the original design that God introduced in Genesis to work diligently. And so let's go ahead and look at that. We're going to start in 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 11. It says, "Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life and to attend to your own business and work with your hands, just as we instructed you, so that you will behave properly toward outsiders and not be in need." So first, let's start with the ambitious part. I think this is a word that we think about a lot in the world. We think about what it's like to be ambitious. I think in general that's perceived as a good thing, although I think some people maybe have twisted that a little bit in our modern world, and it's can almost be used like the scripture talks about selfish ambition. That's clearly a bad thing when you're just like, at all costs, I will succeed, and whether I'll step on other people to succeed. That's not proper ambition. But I think in our culture, we generally understand that somebody having ambition or having an ambitious life, that's a good thing. You strive for greatness. You strive to do great things. You're not lazy. You don't want to just sit by and do nothing. So we think about ambition's not a foreign word to us. However, what Paul says here is pretty interesting. He doesn't say, he's not condemning ambition, but the ambition that he's calling you to is not to build a name for yourself, to not build influence, build a huge following, to build wealth even, although there's necessary aspects to that. He says, be ambitious to be quiet. Be ambitious to live quietly. What is he saying here? He's not saying that we're to be just timid and passive and lazy and we just don't do anything, so we just kind of stay out of the way. That's not really what he's calling you to at all. He's calling you to a life of deep productivity, but rather the quietness is just the stability of showing up day after day. You're dependable. You are peaceable. You're faithful. You're free from unnecessary drama. You're a kind of person that just goes about his business, shows up diligently, and puts the work in without making a fuss about it, doesn't complain, doesn't say, well, I'm just so busy, I can't handle all this stuff. Like, can somebody please help me out? You just show up, you do your job, you do what you can to do exactly what you're called to do. I was at, this weekend, I took a little backstory. My wife had to go to Marshall's once and took our kids with her, obviously, because we have 3 young kids. And ever since then, my son Theo, who's 3, he's turning 4 tomorrow, actually. He has declared Marshall's to be his favorite store. I guess there was some decent toys there. And so anytime we'd ask him, like, hey, where do you want to go today? He would go, Marshall's. So this weekend, my wife was taking the girls somewhere to do their own little errand thing. And then I decided to take Theo. And there wasn't a Marshall's close by there, but there was a TJ Maxx. So I said, hey, it's like Marshall's, buddy. So anyway, we go to TJ Maxx. We start looking at the toys. And I saw this soccer ball on the shelf, and I went over and looked at it, and this is what it said on the box. It said, silent soccer ball. Play soccer silently, anytime, anywhere. It made me laugh because I don't know about you, but anytime I've seen a group of kids playing soccer somewhere in the field or at the playground or at the park, the first thought is not, wow, that ball is loud. I wish they had a quieter ball. But nevertheless, apparently that product was needed. Some people, maybe you're living on the third floor of an apartment and your downstairs neighbors are sick of your kid practicing dribbling in the living room, and they wanted to come up with a solution to that. Maybe somebody needs that product out there. But that's not exactly what Paul's talking about. He's not talking about actual quietness where you just shut up all the time and you never say anything. He's talking about, if you've ever seen the movie WALL-E, another, having kids, you see these movies kind of ad nauseum in your house. WALL-E there's nothing left on Earth. It's just a desolate wasteland. And yet he had a job to do. He was programmed to clean up the trash. And he did that faithfully day after day. He didn't complain about it. He just knew what he had to do. He knew his assignment, and he showed up and he did it. Or my wife and I recently watched through The Lord of the Rings. Samwise Gamgee is the same way. He had legitimate reasons to complain about what he was called to do. And he didn't even have to do it. It wasn't even like, this is your expectation. He just was so faithful to Frodo and what ultimately was the mission of that calling, that he was willing to go through it all the way to the end. He was a faithful friend and a faithful worker. They would not have succeeded without him being just this quiet support throughout the entire series. And I think that's what we're all called to do. It's the Christian life is beautifully ordinary. You just show up, you do your duty. There's probably not going to be biographies written about you, and that's okay. Not every one of us is going to be a William Wilberforce or you name the missionary that succeeded and did wonderful things. You are probably just going to show up, do your job, build your family, build a business, whatever it might be for you. And you just show up quietly every single day and you do your duty. You don't have to become famous to be faithful. All right, so that's the ambition. Be ambitious to be quiet. Next, Paul says to attend your own business, attend to your own affairs. This is kind of like, hey, keep to yourself. Not in the sense that you don't interact with other people or you don't get involved in people's lives, but rather avoid the kind of that busybody gossip. I'm just like meddling in other people's affairs constantly because I just want to know what's going on. And it's actually robbing you of the ability to be productive in what you're actually called to do. You're not called to meddle in people's lives. I think especially in today's day and age with social media, it's so easy. We read those like mean comments that people left. It's so easy to just like pick on people on the internet because you get to hide behind your computer. You're not actually directly confronting somebody face to face. You're just doing it behind a screen, and you're shielded from the kind of the consequences that have existed for all of human history. Like if you would confront somebody for all of human history and you're mean and you start calling them names or whatever, they could punch you in the face. But when you're on your computer, there's no threat of that. They might say some mean words back, but that's really all it is. So there's this temptation in our modern world to kind of just go on social media, and the algorithms are trained because they know that you like to see divisive stuff and then they want you to engage with it, all this stuff. I think that is just a waste of time. You don't need to comment on everything you see that you disagree with. Just move on. If it bothers you that much, just unfollow the person, unsubscribe. Social media is going to reward you from stopping and looking at things and actually commenting on things. So just why bother? Like, how productive is that kind of work? I think it's very little. So don't meddle in people's affairs. Don't be a gossip or a busybody and so concerned with other people that you're just sacrificing your own productivity. Focus on yourself. Mind your own business. Attend to your own business. Make that your first priority. Other people are going to get involved in your life. Life is going to be messy enough as it is. You're going to be in a church community where people have real struggles. People have real sin struggles. That's enough for you to manage or to at least be involved with to help. Maybe you're helping counsel people that are struggling. Maybe you're helping. Obviously, if you have kids, you're going to have to do that kind of stuff all the time. That's plenty. when it comes to dealing with other people and their own issues. You don't need to go looking for more. I think road rage is another example where just people, why do we get so frustrated with other people on the road? Like, is this worth your time to drum up more drama in your life, to get more frustrated with other people? Like, just take a breath, let it happen. And move on. There's no reason to. People lose their lives out there over this kind of thing. Like, you read these stories of guys pulling out a gun when they get an incident of road rage. It's insane. This does not need to be a part of our lives at all. So mind your own business. Just faithfully show up every day, and don't become consumed with everybody else while neglecting your own responsibilities. Make sure you're prioritizing your own responsibilities. So questions to ask yourself: am I managing my household? Am I managing my finances? Am I actually doing the things that I'm called to do, or am I busy doing other things? You could spend a lot of time. You could waste a lot of time in today's modern age, especially with doom scrolling, social media, all this stuff. And I think the Apostle Paul's words here are particularly applicable to what we deal with in our modern world. The next phrase he says is that we are to work with our hands. And so this is a kind of an important part of it, that Paul is dignifying the work itself. Not merely, like I said, the ministry, the missionaries, the preaching. He is dignifying the average, ordinary work that you might find yourself in. I think it begs the question. He's saying, you work with your hands. He lived in a culture where what we would consider kind of white collar, more maybe knowledge work wasn't as prevalent. So you kind of have to contextualize that a little bit. I don't think he's saying you need like a blue collar manual labor job in order to fulfill this calling. I think the emphasis here is honest, productive labor as opposed to idleness is the key here, not being idle or lazy. I think the idiom "work with your hands" is kind of rooted in the world that he lived in. And in the ancient world, everybody they were farmers, they were fishermen, they were blacksmiths. He was a tent maker. So I don't think that this would exclude modern, maybe white collar work if that's what you find yourself doing. As long as it's honest, provides real value. Like I said earlier, I don't think the job actually matters all that much. I think you can fulfill this calling to work with your hands as long as you're doing it to the best of your ability, and it's honest work. Paul himself, again, he was a tent maker. He supported his ministry through this vocation. He didn't rely upon, and I should have looked this up. There's examples where he actually intentionally avoids receiving like gifts from other people because he didn't want them to remember him for that. He wanted to provide for his own ministry by the tent making that he would do. He could have accepted the financial support and it would have been legitimate. You don't have to be if you're a pastor, you don't have to be a bivocational pastor. I think elsewhere, Jesus talks about the laborer deserving his wages. I think a pastor deserves to be compensated for what he does. But there are some pastors out there that just the necessity of maybe they're a smaller church that they do have to be bivocational. I think that's respectable in its own way and right. But all that to say, the Apostle Paul kind of sets an example here of he is very much not an idle person. He worked very, very hard day and night. So again, I said this earlier, but there's no sacred secular divide here. You can glorify God through whatever your vocation is. Whether you're a plumber or a mechanic, you can show up every day and do your job. All honest work glorifies God. Okay, then he moves on and he says, "What? So those are kind of the commands. Why does this matter?" Verse 12 gives two reasons. Number one, so you will behave properly toward outsiders. This is interesting, that actually by being a disciplined worker, it changes the way that you behave towards other people. And I think it makes sense when you think about it. A disciplined work ethic is going to carry over to other aspects of your life. If you're disciplined in one area of your life, it's going to be easier to be disciplined in another area of your life. I think so when it comes to the way that you interact with other people, you're going to be kind and respectable because you're honest in the way that you do your job on a day-to-day basis. If you're like lazy in your job, it's going to be easier to be lazy in your relationships. It's going to be easier to be lazy in other areas of your life. I think across the board, the more that we can, in all areas of our lives, in all the spheres of influence that we have, in all of the areas that God calls us to lead and to have responsibility, if we're disciplined, faithful in all of those things, it's going to be easier to be disciplined and faithful in the others. So it just kind of carries over. I think it's rare for somebody to be really disciplined in one area of their life and just completely drop the ball in other areas. Now, I say that with a caveat. You can absolutely be so locked in on the work side that you kind of neglect a lot of other things. And that's kind of goes back to a lot of the things we talk about with balance. But if you're, the point is being disciplined, should, and by necessity kind of carry over to the other areas of your life. And that should be your goal, to be able to behave properly towards outsiders by being a good worker. And then your coworkers will notice this kind of thing, or your spouse, your family, they see how you are as a worker. They can pick up on this. So people will notice the reliability, the diligence, the guy that just shows up faithfully. They'll notice laziness too. So make sure that you're just you kind of have this dialed in when you show up to work every day. This kind of goes back to the way that we witness. It's not just in the things that we say, but it's in how we work. So that's the first thing. Why does this matter? Because it'll help you behave properly towards outsiders. Number two, so that you will not be in any need. Obviously, work comes along with it. Compensation, you'll get paid for your work. Most of us aren't working for free and volunteering our time. We're working a job so that we can provide for our family and we can do the things that we need to do. Paul is assuming that Christians should strive towards self-sufficiency when possible, not independence from God, but avoiding unnecessary dependence on others. Now, the church is called to be generous. We're called to help those in need, but we are not to be the ones that presume upon that generosity and to be recipients of it. We are never to take advantage of the kindness and generosity of others. And this applies beyond generosity and being recipients of people's generosity. If you think about sin and grace, we are completely and fully forgiven in Christ. And when we sin, we have full forgiveness. And we can go to the Lord and be completely and utterly redeemed from it. Yet, Paul also says in Romans, are we to continue in sin that grace may abound? In other words, should we presume upon this grace because it's so free? We can just keep sinning and we'll just keep being forgiven. And he emphatically says, absolutely not. Though we have this free gift of salvation, we should strive for increasing actual holiness in our lives. We're justified right from day one, perfectly holy and accepted in Christ, but we have the ability through sanctification, to continue to grow in our actual practical holiness. And that's kind of what we should be striving for. We shouldn't let's just stay really as sinful as we possibly can be so we can receive more grace. That's not the attitude to have. Similarly here, we should not strive to get as much generosity from other people as possible. We don't want to be in need. Another example would be the Lord's sovereignty. He's sovereign over everything. Does that mean we should just stop praying? Absolutely not. The Lord calls us to pray as a means of his enacting his sovereign plan throughout the world. Our prayers are a means of that being accomplished. So we should continue to pray, even though the Lord is sovereign. And again, the church is very generous. It's called to generosity. So does that mean I can just stop working and just let the church take care of me? Absolutely not. So you should keep working. Don't become a burden on other people. I think it's clear, caveat, there are legitimate reasons to be in need. You might be hit with a tragedy, a disability. You might get laid off for a season. You might get sick and deal with an illness. This is not condemning that. There might be legitimate reasons for you to receive and accept the church's generosity. And the Bible repeatedly commands generosity towards those in need. So you can't use this on the flip side. If somebody comes to you and is actually in need, you say, no, you have to earn it. Work for yourself. You should always be generous towards those in need. But let's not be the people to take advantage of that and just go, well, they're going to help me out, so why do I need to do anything? Paul is addressing avoidable idleness. And then there's another verse in 2 Thessalonians where he says, if anyone's not willing to work, let him not eat. Notice the wording here. Again, this is kind of piggybacking on what I just said. He's not saying if anyone cannot work. He's saying if anyone's not willing to work. So are you just not willing to do this? Or is it like, I legitimately can't? I'm disabled. I can't do this. There's a huge difference here. And it's an issue of the heart. Are you willing to put in the work? Are you willing to show up every day? Or are you starting to become letting some bitterness, or I'm sorry, not bitterness, letting some laziness creep into your life where you're just presuming upon the generosity of others. It's Paul says that some people had become idle, disorderly, and busybodies. And it's kind of an interesting progression here because when this meaningful work disappears in your life, you become consumed with other things. And so I think kind of going back to the verses in 1 Thessalonians, we're called to mind our own affairs. We're called to work with our hands. These things all tie in together. When you start to become lax in one of these areas, you're going to increase in the other. If you start to become lazy in your job, you might start becoming more of a busybody, more of a gossip, more interested in what other people are doing rather than what you're supposed to be doing. Some modern examples of this where you're just like, they call it, I think we're all familiar with the phrase now, but like doom scrolling is now a thing that people do where you just go on your phone, you're on Instagram, TikTok, whatever the platform is, and you're just like scrolling through content endlessly, like feeding your brain with like endless dopamine hits. And some of it might actually be like inspiring content. You might be inspired to work out more if you see something, or you might be inspired to start a business. But when you watch 3 million of these videos over the course of 2 hours, you finish that doom scrolling session, you go, what was that thing that I watched that was so inspiring 2 hours ago? I don't remember. And then you just move on. And then you do it again the next night, and the next night, and the next night. So like endless time just wasted on the internet. Constant outrage. Again, some of these algorithms are going to feed that kind of thing. They want you to see the stuff that's going to rile you up. So don't fall for that trap. I think we talked about him a lot last week. We've talked about it. We did a whole episode on this guy in the podcast. George Costanza is a great example of somebody that was taking advantage of other people's generosity. He was always on unemployment in that stretch where he was just trying to extend that as long as possible between jobs, doing everything he could to avoid actual responsibility and work. This is not what we're called to do as Christians. So Paul reminds them that he practices he's practicing what he preaches. He reminds them that we worked day and night, not because we had to, but because we wanted to model something. And so there's some leadership by example here. If you're a parent and you have kids, they see what you're doing. And we should be not only teaching them with our words and educating them what they are called to do, but we should actually be modeling that with our lives as well. Children learn largely by watching the adults in their lives. Okay, we're kind of going to wrap things up here soon, but in all of this, don't grow weary in doing the good that you're called to. Faithful work can often feel unnoticed. Hopefully, you're noticed by somebody. Hopefully, if you're married, if this is a good reminder for you husbands, notice the things that your wife does that she maybe doesn't get thanked for. The meals that she puts on the table, the diapers that are changed in the middle of the night. If you're a wife and you see the things your husband does, he taking out the trash, all these things, like show appreciation every once in a while. It's not something that needs to be thanked constantly, but I think a lot of the faithful, ordinary things they go unthanked and unnoticed for so long. But nevertheless, whether you're thanked or not, remember that the Lord sees it. The Lord sees the ordinary work, the ordinary faithfulness that you do, and you will be ultimately rewarded for it someday. Show up, do the thing that you have to do every day. It's repeated endlessly. You show up 5 days a week, maybe 52 weeks a year, 50 weeks a year if you take a couple weeks of vacation. You show up and you do it. You're compensated for it. That should be enough, but just remember that the Lord sees the ordinary work that you're doing. When you work faithfully, it creates the margin in your life to provide, to save, to give, invest, and to protect, and ultimately to leave an inheritance to your kids. Our entire framework kind of begins with productive work. Everything that you do in your life, unless you started out with this massive inheritance and that's kind of your wealth that you've built or somebody else built and you got to inherit, most of us are trying to build this in our lives, and work allows you to do that. So without income, the ability to do this kind of becomes impossible. You need to start somewhere, and ordinary work is how you do this. But work is about more than the income. It's about dignity and purpose and fulfilling your calling that God called man to way back in Genesis 2, way back in the garden, to be workers and to show up daily. It's not the ultimate purpose of work to earn money, though that is an absolute necessary consequence of work, and that's not to be neglected. And obviously, our whole podcast is about what to do with your money to make sure that you're faithful in how you deal with your finances. Okay, 3 errors to avoid, and then we're going to kind of wrap this up. Don't despise your work. You're called to do this. You're called to show up every day. Don't let bitterness it's easy to dislike work. It's work. We all have to do it. Nope. I mean, you can love your job. A lot of people do love their jobs, but a lot of people really don't like their jobs. And quite frankly, that's okay. But don't let it get to a place where you're just like bitter about your job, that you resent it. Don't let that happen. See if you can reframe your mind and realize that you're actually fulfilling a calling in your life by showing up every day. That doesn't mean you're always like doomed to a job that you absolutely despise. Absolutely not. But in that season, if you genuinely do despise it, let it be a reminder that you are actually still fulfilling a calling as long as you're doing it faithfully. Now you can look for other jobs that you might want to be able to fulfill this a little bit more with a little bit more pleasure in your life. I don't think that's a bad thing to want to enjoy your job, but at the end of the day, all work is work, and it's going to be difficult at times. It's going to be hard. It's going to be thankless. It's going to require a lot of discipline and a lot of hard work, a lot of sweat and toil because of the fall. Don't let that dissuade you from what you're called to do. Don't let that be a barrier to you actually showing up every day. If you dislike it, you're still called to show up and to do it. On the flip side of it, don't idolize work. I don't know how many people actually struggle with this, but it is possible to become so enamored with your work that you neglect other areas of your life. Like I said earlier, don't neglect your family at the expense of your job. Allow it to be the thing that you do to fulfill your calling in Genesis 2, but don't become so don't work 24/7 and never spend time with your wife and kids. And don't avoid responsibility. When an opportunity comes up at your job, you don't always have to be the first one to jump at every single possible thing that shows up because you might put too much on your plate. It's okay to say no to things, but know when to say yes, know when to say no, and don't avoid responsibility just because you don't feel like doing something. If there's an opportunity to provide some real value, and there's, let's say, a project that comes up in your job, I'm just trying to think of a generic example, and you hear of the opportunity and they're looking for people who might spearhead it, and you go, I can knock that out of the park. Do it. Show up, put your name on the table, and just go, yeah, I want to do that. I want to help out here. In conclusion, Paul's vision of the Christian life is pretty ordinary. Show up every day. Pray every day. Read your Bible. Take care of your wife and your kids. Take care of your husband and your kids. If you don't have kids, take care of the responsibilities that God's put on your plate. No matter where you are, in whatever season of life you're in, you have a responsibility today. Make sure that you show up there to do the thing that you're called to do. By doing this, you're going to mind your own affairs. You're not going to meddle in the lives of others. It's going to allow you to be generous with people. It's going to allow you to save for the future. It's going to allow you to not be a burden on other people. And when you do all this, let this be an encouragement. Don't grow weary in doing this good. In a world that's obsessed with becoming extraordinary, I think we should strive to be the best ordinary people that we can be. The best thing that a Christian can do is to simply be faithful every single day of their lives, and don't grow weary in it. Enjoy it and glorify God through it. That's all we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. If you've made it this far, sorry that we didn't have Logan with us today, but I am sure he will be back with us next week for another episode of Plan to Prosper. God bless. Investment advisory services offered through Stonecrop Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. This material is intended for informational purposes only.